Hey there, today I will be filling out the next 4 Affiliations report cards for Marvel Crisis Protocol. My name is Nate, and welcome to the Gamers Guild. Before I continue handing out grades, I want to remind everyone that thanks to the Guild's new sponsor, Tritex Games, I'm doing a monthly giveaway for Marvel Crisis Protocol. You can enter by being subscribed to the channel and then leaving a comment on each video that releases in a month. So each comment will be 1 entry for that month. For example, in the month of February, there will be 4 MCP videos, so 4 potential points of entry. As well, Tritex is offering an additional 5% off their MCP products with the code TritexGGCP5 at checkout, which is insane because if you pre-order with them, you're already getting 20% off, so this would accumulate to 25% off your pre-ordered items. The giveaway will always be of a model coming out the following month. So if this contest was going on in January, it would have been for some of these Inhumans. But since there isn't yet any official confirmation as to what is or is not being released next month, I'm not going to try and set any expectations for what the prize will be yet. Now, before I get into really the report cards, I want to clear up a couple of things. My grading scale is going to be a C to A scale, with B being the average, C being below average, and A above average. My hope is that then these final grades or overall grades will give you an idea of how easy it can be to pick up an affiliation and play them effectively. There won't be any failing grades because I really don't think any one category for any affiliation is failing, because even what I think one of the worst affiliations in the game currently is still finding success in leagues and tournaments. And for anyone who didn't watch the previous video in this series, this is the rubric I will be grading all of the affiliations by. The categories I want to cover are the leadership ability on its own, the tactic cards for the affiliation, how deep the affiliation's roster is, and then how well the team plays with each other, and how well the team can play with other characters outside of the affiliation. A couple of things worth mentioning here is the leadership's ability and the team tactic cards grade are going to be graded in a vacuum to see just how good these different abilities are on their own. Then they will be making a large impact on the synergies categories of both unaffiliated and affiliated. And with that, let's get into the Guardians of the Galaxy. Their leadership ability is titled Winging It, and if you were going to get a grade on a presentation after winging it, well, you won't be surprised with what the Guardians end up with. Star-Lord allows his teammates at the start of one of your turns to discard a team tactic card to receive 3 Winging It tokens. These tokens can be spent to reroll 2 dice in an attack, defense, or dodge roll, but only 1 token can be spent per roll. And the tokens are removed during the cleanup step of that round. So on the upside here, if you have a way to get off several attacks in a round, you can use this to get some extra consistency out of that character. Or if you have a character with an important objective, you can give them some extra defensive rerolls. But it's all at the cost of one of the most valuable resources in the game, your tactic cards. Now, don't get me wrong, if I had a tactic card that said, for 0 power, one character can get to reroll up to 6 dice during a round, that card would see some play. But then I would also have a leadership ability also providing additional support for my team. The lack of a secondary minor benefit and the extreme cost of losing a tactic card makes me have to give the Guardians a C here. Then for tactic cards, the Guardians have a wide selection much like the Avengers thanks to several duo team-ups, but also very few of these tactic cards are going to provide consistent value. Crew of the Milano removing status conditions is great, but how often is your entire team really bogged down by status conditions? Similarly, Lovable Misfits is a super fun and thematic team tactic card that fits with the winging it mentality that the Guardians have. But its randomness can also certainly make its reliability limited. Daughters of Thanos is a pretty conditional card in that Nebula and Gamora will need to be close enough to the same target, and then you have to go and spend a total of 4 power for 1 attack. It's not a great rate, especially when you compare it to one of the best duo cards in the game that's also within the Guardians affiliation, Deadly Duo. Groot and Rocket are going to be a pair you probably keep close together because of the bodyguard ability Groot has for Rocket anyways. But then being able to pop off 3 range 5 dice energy attacks, and it doesn't even cost an action for the same 4 power. Deadly Duo is just a great tactic card, and probably the main reason I'm going to give the Guardians a B instead of a lower grade here. Their affiliation depth is something to be commended though, with 8 different characters that can each fill a unique role, 2 2-threat characters, and 2 characters that can each use the same gem. The lack of Mystic is a bit unfortunate, but overall I'll give them a B+ here, and on the next category of Affiliation Synergy. One of the cool things about the Guardians is that they are each built for a specific role and can accomplish it quite well, and they work really well together. Unfortunately, the leadership ability doesn't synergize with most of the characters very well, and to me at least there's only one standout tactic card, leaving their synergies at a B+. On the downside of how this affiliation can do when you have them all in your roster, plus the power gem, is that there is only 1 character spot left in your 10. And so then maybe you cut Gamora, it still only leaves you with 2 character spots to fill in the gaps. And besides the universally powerful characters, there aren't many that will add something to the Guardians roster, and really the Guardians don't have much to offer anyone joining the affiliation, so I have to give them a C here. For an overall grade of somewhere between a really high C+ and a really low B-. The Guardians are maybe one of the most fun teams to play because of their chaotic nature and ability to go really wide with a lot of damage output, but also a lot of their characters are easily pushed over. A new leadership ability that is able to benefit the defenses of this team at a cost that isn't so high would bring up several different grades for the Guardians. But next up is the group that the Guardians always seem to be pitted against. Thanos and his Black Order have 2 different leadership abilities, one on the healthy side of Thanos and one on the injured side. The first side is simply going to provide a victory point whenever an enemy character is KO'd, which is great for some supplemental victory points, but you have to finish off the enemy character entirely for this to happen. Then on Thanos' injured side, that ability is lost and his allies can begin to get rerolls on their attacks at the cost of losing health. So the front side is nice for maybe 1 or 2 victory points, but even that's a maybe that could amount to nothing, especially if Thanos gets flipped earlier, then his front side leadership may as well not exist at all. His flip side though is okay. The benefit to cost ratio isn't great because unless you are fishing for a wild or another result to trigger a bonus effect, you're trading up to 3 health for the chance, and only the chance at 3 extra damage. Since the dice are 50-50, it really should be seen as a desperation play that will make a huge swing in the game if you're paying that price. So I have to give Thanos' leadership abilities a C. The ability to maybe score some VP and then some very, very pricey rerolls just isn't that great. But if we look at the tactic cards, we get to see the Black Order shine a bit. Corvus's and Proximus tag team of an opposing model not getting to roll any defense dice is really cool, but it's 4 power for 1 attack that you would just hate to whiff on yourself. Really, Mothership and Price of Failure are my 2 favorites, but even Blood to Spare is a pretty solid contender as far as tactic cards go. Mothership provides some insane mobility for any of the 5 in-affiliation characters. Price of Failure doesn't have to be played by an affiliated character, so sacrificing a 2-threat character who is on their last legs to give the rest of your team 3 power each seems pretty good. And I have won games with Ronin's ability to attack before getting dazed or KO'd that I would have otherwise lost. So I have to support Blood to Spare as a powerful card, even if it is a bit niche. So the Black Order get an A here. Their affiliation depth is a very solid B. There isn't a lot of variety, and like Asgard, the Black Order only has 1 3-threat character, which can create problems when building a team, but this is kind of balanced out with all of the gems that the Black Order has access to and wants to buff up Thanos and Corvus. So their in-affiliation play is pretty high because, well, it almost has to be. Since Thanos is a 6-threat character that needs at least 1 gem to really shine, and then to stay within the affiliation, you have to have another 2 characters from the Black Order most of the time. And since most of the Black Order is pretty aggressive, they are hopefully triggering Thanos' leadership ability at least once or twice before he gets dazed. And then the tactic cards play out really nicely as well. So I'll give them an A here. And unfortunately though, like the Guardians before them, this means that they aren't the best equipped for characters outside of the affiliation to come in and do crazy things. There is space for a 2-threat character which they need to help round out the point totals, and maybe a flex 3-threat character who can help lay in either on damage or objective control. But the characters coming in don't get a lot of support from the leadership ability, and may in fact just be there to be killed off by a tactic card. But the Black Order does need some outside support to be able to function at some of the different threat levels. And since Thanos has the ability to help with some movement and buff attacks, there are some redeeming elements to joining the Black Order as long as you stay close to the Mad Titan. So I'll give the Order a C+ here, because there aren't any intrinsic reasons to play outside of the affiliation unless you're forced to for certain threat levels or missions, leaving the Black Order with an overall score of B+. Now, don't get me wrong with this score. The Black Order can be an absolute wrecking ball on the table, and once you know how to play them, they can be a top-tier affiliation. But on what I'm grading them on and how difficult they can be to play correctly on certain objective setups, I feel like a decent B+ right now is right for them. And what would open up a lot of doors for this affiliation is just a leader that doesn't cost at least 7 threat. That's at least 1/3 of your team in one character. So a less expensive leader would open up the possibilities in general, but also a new leadership could only bring good things to this affiliation. And finally, we now get to the Web Warriors, who are probably designed to be released before even Asgard, and it shows a little bit in certain places. One of those places, though, is definitely not their leadership ability. Miles' Great Responsibility has 2 separate abilities built into the one leadership. The first is that allied characters may reroll 1 defense dice per roll. No cost, just a free defensive reroll. That's pretty good as it is. But then there is the additional bit that allied characters that are holding or contesting an objective may reroll failures, which can be huge for anyone who has a way to modify or reroll their dice, like, well, anyone who is now a part of the Web Warriors. It's hard not to justify an A here. The upside for characters who can take advantage of rerolling or modifying skulls on their own is huge, and a free defensive reroll is something that everyone can make use of. Unfortunately, where their design space does show a bit of age is their tactic cards. Web Barrier is a card I am still confused by because I am not sure how to make any real use of it in a game. Venom and Ace Spider-Man can use Uneasy Allies for a fun duo attack, and of the duo cards out there, it's actually a pretty good one since it doesn't cost any power, and even more so when Venom plays it. But the range requirement makes it a bit more difficult to pull off consistently, especially since the web heads like being more spread out all over the table. My favorite option from among their lineup, though, is All Webbed Up, which can slow down several enemy characters and lets the Web Warriors really show up on offense for a turn by getting extra dice on those slowed enemies. Unfortunately, the Web Warriors don't have many other ways to slow down their opponents, so I have to give the tactic cards a B here. The depth of the roster is also kind of disappointing. Thankfully, there are more releases on the way, but currently the roster is only 5 deep. And out of those 5 characters, there are only 3 energy attacks, and only one of those has a strength above 4. So I will give them a B because while the Web Warriors tend to enjoy going wide, they only have 2 3-threat characters in Affiliation, and the rest are at 4, and the rest of the stuff that I've already mentioned. But the Web Warriors are a very adaptable affiliation. Despite their low roster count, they all seem to benefit from certain playstyles, with most everyone having a long move in some form of objective control with pushes and pulls, or even forcing an opponent to drop an objective with Miles. And with All Webbed Up, they're able to get a turn of really nice offense for the team when they need it, so I have to give their affiliated synergy an A. And their unaffiliated synergies are really just about the same. The maximum potential is really high for some characters. Because the leadership ability is also one that can work for everybody, I'm going to leave them with an A here as well. Characters like Black Panther and Shuri work really well by making their reroll abilities even better and more consistent. Then other characters like Crystal, who can help give out some of these slow conditions, are welcome additions to the affiliation, so it both gives and takes. I feel pretty good about their out of affiliation synergies, leaving the Web Warriors with an overall grade of A-, which leads me to their mortal enemies. And with the shape that they are in, it is no surprise that these teenagers are able to put the beat down on their foes time and time again. Let's start with their leadership ability. All in all, this is actually a pretty decent ability. For 1 power, Green Goblin's access to Osborne weapons can make an opponent reroll 1 defense dice per turn. So the ability to force a reroll after your opponent has modified their own dice is pretty strong because it can break through things like cover or those Spider-Man rerolls. But it costs a power, which will always be a downside even if a small one. But this power isn't even for a guaranteed effect. But what I really dislike about this ability is that it's only once per turn. So even those characters who do have enough power to try and use this each time they attack can't. It's only once per turn, so I'm going to have to give it a B-. Tactic cards, well, there aren't any affiliated cards, but Green Goblin and Doc Ock do have a duo card that can do pretty well. But the timing here can be a bit tricky, even if you decide to bring the card. First, this is a card you probably only really want to bring if there are several extracts you can force your opponent to drop. You can still bring it on the single extracts like Kree Power Core, but 6 power is a pretty decent investment, and rolling only on 1 character increases the chances of this card just whiffing, even when rolling 5 dice. And then the timing can be tricky because typically this is a card you want to play at the end of a round. That way you can make your opponent drop as many objectives as possible before they're scored. But then Gobby and Doc Ock have to hold on to 3 power that they can't use during their activation, and you have to make sure neither of these 2 characters gets dazed or KO'd, otherwise the card just can't be played. Now granted, this card is a lot more open on an objective like hammers, where you want to knock them out early so your opponent isn't throwing as many dice, but that's a best case situation for this card. So it should probably make it in your 8 if you're doing only spider foes. I'm not sure how often it's supposed to actually come to the table. So I'm giving them a C here. As far as affiliation depth goes, I'm going to give them a C as well. Half of their affiliation moves slow, there are only 4 characters, and I feel like this category is merging a bit with me for their affiliated synergies in my head, which I'm going to give a C-. This score could have and would have been higher if drop-off wasn't banned, because Green Goblin being able to drop off Kingpin or Venom would have been a huge boost to what this team is able to do. But as it is, all of these characters other than Doc Ock are pretty power hungry for their own superpowers and attacks, so they aren't using the leadership ability much. There isn't really a cohesive strategy for the team right now. All of the characters in Affiliation are pretty tanky with stout defenses or ways to heal, but there isn't any intrinsic way for them to benefit from this. This team just desperately needs a Gobby-only version of drop-off, like the reverse of She-Hulk Special Delivery. And while the Affiliation desperately needs other characters to come in and flesh out some of their different weak points, there isn't much for the Spider Foes to offer their temporary allies. Characters like Vision or Enchantress could have been stellar with their beam attacks if the leadership ability wasn't only once per turn. But it isn't. So even the characters who have some power to burn can only use 1 of it per turn. So I have to give the Spider Foes a C for their unaffiliated synergies for an overall grade of C. Now again, this doesn't mean that they are an unplayable affiliation, but it takes some help and practice to get to a point where they can be played very well. For example, there is a list made by Lexa from the Morlocks podcast that is performing really well in the latest online league. If you want to find out more about that, go check out their podcast. I'll have a link in the description of this video where the Spider Foes are talked about. Now, that is all I have for this week. If you think one or all of these affiliations deserve a different grade, let me know down in the comments below, and it will also enter you in that giveaway by Tritex. Real quick before I close, I want to say thank you to all the members of the Guild Hall. The growth over this past month has been crazy and humbling beyond belief. And I almost have next month's tokens ready to show off for those who are interested. If you are interested in supporting the guild further, please check out either the Patreon link down below or shop at Tritex Games website and use that promo code for an extra 5% off, which saves you money and lets them know that I sent you that way. And it will especially help with some of those upcoming mutants that we have on the horizon. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at one of the links down below. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, keep on gaming.